Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen. I'm thrilled to have you join me for today's webinar on one of the most critical and often underestimated decisions for medical device manufacturers: choosing the right notified body for CE marking. So let's start with a reality check. Since the transition from the Medical Device Directive, MDD, to the Medical Device Regulation, MDR, the number of designated notified bodies has dropped drastically from over 80 under MDD to just around 44 under the MDR. Now that's almost a 50% reduction, meaning fewer organisations are available to process thousands of certification applications, and the result is longer wait times, increased scrutiny, and growing frustration for manufacturers. But here's the real challenge. In 2023, nearly 80% of MDR applications submitted to notified bodies were either delayed or rejected due to insufficient documentation or misalignment with regulatory expectations. So imagine spending months, sometimes even years in some cases, developing an innovative medical device only to face setback after setback because your notified body doesn't have the right expertise, is overwhelmed with applications, or has unclear review timelines. This is why choosing the right notified body isn't just about ticking a regulatory box. It's about ensuring your device reaches patients as efficiently and as smoothly as possible. And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. So by the end of today's session, you'll have a clear, actionable strategy for selecting the right notified body, including what a notified body actually does and why their role is crucial for CE marking, the most important factors to consider when selecting the right notified body for your specific device, common pitfalls that lead to certification delays and how to avoid them, and finally, best practices for establishing a strong collaborative relationship with your notified body. And of course, if you have any further questions following today's session, you can email them directly to us using Riddion at riddionresourcehub.com, and we'll address a few questions already submitted by you during the Q&A at the end. So let's begin. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is a notified body, and why is it essential for CE marking? If you're a medical device manufacturer looking to sell in the EU, securing CE marking is your ticket to market access. But not all devices can be self-certified. For most Class 2A, 2B and Class 3 devices, you need an independent organisation to assess your product and ensure it meets the strict safety, performance and quality standards of the MDR. This is the Medical Device Regulation, or the IVDR, the In Vitro Diagnostic Regulation. And that's where a notified body comes in. A notified body is not a government agency. It's an independent EU-designated organisation that evaluates whether your device complies with MDR or IVDR. So unlike the FDA in the US or the MHRA in the UK, which directly regulate and approve medical devices, notified bodies don't create the regulations. They assess whether manufacturers meet them. So we talk about why this matters. Without notified body approval, your Class 2A, 2B or Class 3 device cannot legally be sold in the EU. So that means before you can even think about launching, your notified body must review your technical documentation, your quality management system, your clinical evidence, and even your post-market surveillance plans, all to ensure that they are compliant. Now, given how strict MDR has become, this process is, well, it's far from a rubber stamp. To illustrate just how important this is, let's imagine a scenario. So you've spent years developing a groundbreaking AI-powered diagnostic tool that detects early signs of heart disease. You've tested it extensively, you've secured your funding, and you are ready to launch in the EU. So under MDR, Rule 11, most medical device software now falls under at least Class 2A. meaning you need a notified body approval. But the problem is you choose a notified body without experience in AI-based diagnostics. They're unfamiliar with how to assess machine learning algorithms, data validation, explainability requirements under the MDR. As a result of this choice, your submission then gets stuck in an endless back and forth of revisions, causing months, possibly even years of delays. In the meantime, a competitor who chose a notified body with the right expertise gets their CE marking first and captures your target market. And this is a very brief example of why choosing the right notified body is a strategic business decision. If you select the wrong one, ultimately you risk delays, you risk increased costs, and you even risk rejection altogether. So select the right one and you'll have a smoother, a faster pathway to EU market approval. So now that we understand the role of notified bodies, we're going to dive into how to choose the right one to set your company and your device up for success. Okay, so not all notified bodies are the same, and selecting the wrong one can cost you time, it can cost you money, it can even cost you your market access. So choosing wisely is about strategic decision making that ensures a smooth, timely certification process. So if you allow me to put this into perspective, since the MDR replaced the MDD, the number of designated notified bodies has dropped significantly. So those still operating are facing overwhelming demand, which has pushed certification timelines to 12 to 18 months, or in some cases even longer. So if you don't choose carefully, you will likely end up stuck in a queue with no clear end in sight, delaying your market launch and giving competitors a head start. So what should you look for? First is scope and expertise. Not all notified bodies are accredited to assess every type of medical device. Each one has a specific scope of designation, which is published in the European Commission's NANDO database. So if you submit an application to a notified body that isn't approved for your device type, your application will be rejected before it even starts. Now imagine preparing your entire technical file, your clinical evaluation report, your risk management documentation, only to realise too late that your chosen notified body can't even certify your device. So you should always check their scope of accreditation up front. Second is experience with similar device classifications. If you manufacture an implantable cardiovascular device, for example, would you trust a notified body whose main experience is in diagnostic imaging or orthopedic implants? The likelihood is probably not. So it's not just about whether they're accredited for your device, it's about whether they have the right experience to understand its complexities. The more experienced the notified body are in your device category, the faster and more efficiently they can assess your submission. Next is approval speed and efficiency. Since the MDR came into effect, notified bodies are dealing with a huge influx of applications, which leads to significant delays. Some are more overwhelmed than others. So before choosing, just ask them how many applications they're currently handling, what their review backlog looks like. Ask them whether they offer any pre-assessment services. A good notified body will help you identify compliance gaps before formal submission, which reduces the chances of rejections and prolonged review cycles. Finally, if we talk about cost and service fees, notified bodies set their own pricing structures, which means fees can vary significantly. These fees cover application review, audits, ongoing surveillance, and they add up over time. But the key to this is cheaper isn't always better. The cheapest option might also mean longer review times. It might mean inconsistent communication or a frustrating certification experience. So instead, look for a notified body that balances efficiency with transparency and long-term support. So ultimately here, choosing a notified body isn't, again, just another box to check. It's a decision that impacts your entire regulatory strategy. So you should take the time to do your research, to ask the right questions, which then allows you to make an informed decision. So moving on nicely. So now we've discussed how to select the right notified body. We'll move on to some of the biggest challenges that manufacturers face in obtaining CE marking, and most importantly, how to overcome them. Okay, so now we'll talk about some of the biggest hurdles that you'll face in obtaining CE marking, and most importantly, how you can overcome them. Because many manufacturers have already discovered, getting CE certification under MDR is about being fully prepared for a much more rigorous approval process than ever before. So if we start with the most pressing issue, which is the limited availability of notified bodies. So since the transition from MDD to MDR, as we've discussed, the number of designated notified bodies has plummeted from 80 or over 80 to, well, around 44. So that means thousands of medical device manufacturers are now all competing for a limited review capacity, which has led to some serious bottlenecks and some extended certification timelines. So if we look firstly at a real world example, a European manufacturer developing a Class 3 implantable device submitted their MDR application expecting a 12-month approval process. Instead, due to the notified body backlogs, their review didn't even begin for 6 months, and by the time they received the feedback, new regulatory clarifications had come into effect, which then forced them to update their technical file and restart entire parts of the process. And the result of this was a delay of nearly 2 years. So the solution to this problem is to engage early. The sooner you secure a notified body, the better your chances are of avoiding these bottlenecks. So don't wait until your documentation is complete. Start discussions with potential notified bodies as early as possible to secure your place in the queue. If you wait until the last minute, that could mean missing market deadlines altogether. So if we move on to another common roadblock, it's the incomplete technical documentation that manufacturers submit. MDR has dramatically increased the level of detail required in clinical evidence, as well as risk management and post-market surveillance planning. So many manufacturers assume that their existing documentation is sufficient, only to then face rejection because their files don't fully align with MDR Annex 2 and Annex 3 requirements. So one of the biggest mistakes is insufficient clinical data. Under MDR, manufacturers must provide robust clinical evidence proving both safety and performance, and this is especially true for high-risk devices. Notified bodies are no longer accepting assumptions or outdated evidence arguments or equivalence arguments. They want clear, well-documented studies that align with the device's intended use. So a way to avoid this pitfall would be to conduct a thorough regulatory gap analysis before submission. Review every aspect of your technical file, every aspect of your risk management reports, every aspect of your clinical evaluation documents to ensure they meet MDR standards. If you work with regulatory consultants or conduct a pre-submission review with your notified body, this can help identify gaps before formal assessment, which could save you months of costly back and forth corrections. Finally, if we talk about post-market surveillance, many manufacturers think compliance ends once they secure CE marking, but under MDR, ongoing compliance is just as important as initial approval. Notified bodies will conduct regular audits to ensure your device continues to meet safety and performance requirements. Delays or inadequate post-market data collection could put you and your device at risk of losing its CE marking altogether. Now, the MDR requires a robust post-market surveillance and reporting system from day one. So that means setting up processes for real world performance tracking, proactive risk assessments, what else? Prompt adverse event reporting. So if your PMS strategy isn't solid, your next audit could be the moment your product is pulled from the market. So ultimately, the bottom line is that CE marking isn't just about passing an initial test. It's about demonstrating ongoing compliance throughout your device's life cycle. Now, the companies that succeed under the MDR are the ones that plan ahead. They are the ones that engage with the right notified body and engage early, and they ensure their documentation is rock solid before submitting it to the notified body. So now that we've covered the challenges, let's move on to the solutions. How can you ensure a seamless, efficient process when working with your notified body? Let's talk best practices. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges of obtaining CE marking from notified body shortages to tougher MDR documentation requirements. But now we're going to focus on something just as important, which is how to build a strong, productive relationship with your notified body. Also, the certification process runs as smoothly and efficiently as possible. So the truth is, your notified body isn't just a regulatory gatekeeper. They're a key player in your device's success. A well-managed relationship can mean faster approvals, it can mean fewer document revisions, and a much easier certification process. But a poorly handled engagement, that can lead to delays, it can lead to miscommunications, it can even lead all the way to rejection. So how do you ensure a seamless working relationship with your notified body? First and foremost is plan ahead. Now, this is probably the single biggest factor that separates companies that succeed under MDR from those that struggle. The demand for notified bodies is higher than ever, and if you wait too long to secure one, you'll likely find yourself stuck in months-long queue with no clear path ahead. So the reality check is that notified bodies are now recommending that manufacturers engage with them at least 12 to 18 months before their planned market entry. So that means if you're targeting EU launch next year, you should already be working with a notified body today. So waiting until the last minute will likely leave you scrambling to meet the deadlines, or worst case scenario, missing out on the market opportunity altogether. Second is to maintain clear and open communication. So CE marking isn't just submitting documents and hoping for the best. It's a continuous process that requires ongoing dialogue between you and your notified body. Now, the most successful manufacturers establish regular check-ins to ensure everyone is aligned on expectations. They address documentation issues early and stay ahead of any regulatory updates that might affect their application. One of the biggest reasons for delays in MDR approvals is the misalignment on expectations. If your notified body identifies gaps in your submission late in the process, that could potentially mean months of additional work before your certification moves forward. You can avoid this by being proactive. You can avoid this by asking questions early and making sure your submission is rock solid before formal review. Finally, you need to treat your notified body as a strategic partner, not an obstacle to your market access. A very common misconception is that notified bodies are simply there to approve or reject applications, but in reality, their role is to assess compliance alongside ensuring patient safety and to help guide manufacturers through the regulatory process. So that means approaching your engagement with a collaborative mindset instead of rushing to submit incomplete documentation and just hoping for the best. You should work proactively with your notified body to ensure your application meets MDR strict requirements from the start. Now, this approach will help you reduce unnecessary back and forth delays. It will help you avoid major compliance gaps and ultimately speed up your certification. So the bottom line is your notified body isn't or your notified body is a key part of your product success. The manufacturers that plan ahead, the manufacturers that communicate effectively and treat it as a collaboration rather than a confrontation will have a much smoother path to CE marking. And with that in mind, we are going to wrap up with some frequently asked questions as submitted by you, and some final takeaways to ensure you walk away from this webinar fully prepared for success. Okay, so before we wrap up, we're going to go over some of the most frequently asked questions about notified bodies and the CE marking process. So these are concerns that we've heard from you, from manufacturers. So if you're wondering about any of these, you are definitely not alone. So question one, how long does CE certification take? Okay, so the timeline really depends on your device classification, the completeness of your submission, and the availability of your notified body. For Class 2B and Class 3 devices, I'd expect the process to take at least 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer if revisions are required. So the key to avoiding unnecessary delays here is early engagement with the notified body, having a complete and well-prepared technical file, and a proactive approach to addressing feedback. Some manufacturers have faced unexpected setbacks because they underestimated how detailed their clinical evidence needed to be. So always ensure that your submissions align with MDR Annex 2 and Annex 3. Next question. Can I work with more than one notified body? Short answer, no. A single notified body is responsible for overseeing your entire CE marking process. Once they begin evaluating your device, they remain your certification partner for audits, for assessments, for post-market surveillance. That said, you can switch notified bodies if necessary. For example, if your current notified body loses its designation, or if their review times become unmanageable. But just be aware that switching is not a simple process. Your new notified body will need to reassess your entire application, which obviously could add significant delays to your timeline. Again, this is why choosing the right notified body from the beginning is critical. Moving on. What happens if my notified body rejects my submission? Okay. I mean, a rejection doesn't necessarily mean that you're out of options, but it does mean you'll need to go back and fix the identified issues. Common reasons for rejection include insufficient clinical evidence, gaps in risk management documentation, failure to meet MDR's stricter safety requirements. So if your submission is rejected, your notified body will provide a report outlining the deficiencies, and you'll have the opportunity to go and correct them. But the best way to avoid rejection in the first place is to conduct a thorough internal review, which will then allow you the opportunity to address potential gaps early, and if needed, consult with regulatory experts before submitting. Next question. What are the most common reasons for delays in CE certification? Most common. Okay, so we go with three of the biggest causes of certification delay. Start with number one, which is notified body backlog. Okay, obviously, with few notified bodies available under MDR, many are overwhelmed with applications, which leads to longer review times, which is why I advocate for engaging early and why it's so important. Two would be incomplete technical documentation. So if your clinical evidence or risk assessment reports don't meet MDR standards, you'll be sent back for revisions, which again can add months to your timeline. Three would be lack of post-market surveillance planning. Notified bodies are now scrutinising PMS plans more than ever. So if you don't have a robust system for monitoring your device's performance after approval, your application may be put on hold. So if you want to avoid these delays, the key is essentially meticulous preparation and early engagement with the notified body again. can't advocate that enough. Next question. Is there a difference in certification timelines between MDR and IVDR? Yes, and the differences are significant. Under IVDR, the need for notified body involvement has dramatically increased compared to the previous IVDD framework. This again has caused major certification backlogs, particularly for higher risk IVDs. So I'm talking Class C and Class D, where approvals can take well over 18 months. The MDR has its own challenges, but the delays under IVDR have been even more severe due to the limited number of notified bodies designated to IVDs. If you're working on an IVD product, you need to engage with a notified body even earlier than MDR. Delays are unavoidable, but early preparation can help mitigate them. Okay, so final takeaways. What are the final takeaways from today's session? Choosing the right notified body is a strategic decision that can essentially make or break your product's path to market. Manufacturers or companies that plan ahead, companies that engage early and select a notified body that aligns with their device type and business needs will have the best chance of securing CE marking without facing the unnecessary delays that we've discussed. So if you're wondering what you should do next or what you can do next, you can download our notified body selection guide and accompanying ebook for a deeper dive into key factors, into timelines, along with expert recommendations. You can subscribe to the Riddion newsletter so you can stay ahead of the evolving EU MDR requirements. And failing that, if you need expert guidance, reach out to us. We're here to help. Use the email address, same one for submitting the questions, Riddion@riddionresourcehub.com. Aside from that, that's all from me today. It's been an absolute pleasure being your host for today's webinar. And as mentioned, if you have any further questions following today's webinar, you can submit them using Riddion@riddionresourcehub.com. Otherwise, you can explore the wealth of resources that we have on our website, Riddionresourcehub.com. And that's it from me. As always, stay informed, stay compliant, and I'll see you next time.